Hello, friends and listeners. Welcome to Truth, Lies, and Alibis, the true crime podcast from three friends sharing their perspectives from having years of 911 dispatch experience.
Episode 19, Suspicious Circumstances. On today's episode, Jess and I discuss the suspicious circumstances surrounding Steven Avery's murder conviction for the murder of Teresa Halbach. So, Jessica, you want to recap what you remember from episode 1?
Yeah. Oh, should I do it? Should I do
from the first part? I want to hear a Jessica recap.
Okay, it's a good thing that I took notes because I've recently realized I'm bad with names and dates, and that's most of what we talk about here. 1985, Penny was attacked, sexually assaulted, beaten, and left for dead. During the police investigation, police have a suspect in mind, Steven Avery. They give Penny pictures of his lineup and a police sketch made from his booking photo, all of which very sketchy, but he's in the lineup, he's in the photo lineup. The actual suspect not in anywhere of that. Even though Steven Avery has 18 or 22 or something like that witnesses giving him an alibi, he gets convicted and is sentenced to 32 years in jail. 18 years into that 32-year sentence, he gets released after work from the Innocence Project comes along, because throughout these 18 years, Steven Avery keeps saying he doesn't do it, doesn't take pleas, anything like that. So 18 years into the sentence, Innocence Project comes along, so requests that the DNA is reran, and well, maybe not rerun because DNA was relatively new at that point. So the DNA is tested and it matches a male called Gregory Allen. So Steven Avery, who is innocent of this crime after spending 18 years in prison, is released. We talked about what that meant as far as like what Penny had to go through and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
But how'd I do?
Perfect. I like your version. It was nice, simple, had everything in it. And then we talked about how he was suing them for $36 million. All right, so we're all caught up, right?
Yes.
I'm going to tell you today the story of Teresa Halbach and how it relates to the false conviction of Steven Avery. I already said in the last episode, what I'm going to tell you is kind of like an overview. It won't be as extensive as the documentary Making a Murderer. It's just kind of to tell Jess, because I thought it would be a fun little story to tell her and get her reaction, because she doesn't know about this story. So, 2 years after Avery's release for his wrongful conviction, and just weeks after the people he was suing, some of the sheriff department employees, were deposed for this lawsuit, Teresa Halbach goes missing. So, I want to make a note. It was on October 31st of 2015, the same day the Avery bill is passed, providing updated guidelines for how to handle suspects and witnesses during interrogation, which is that whole eyewitness protocol. After Steven is implicated in the murder of Teresa Halbach, it's renamed the Criminal Justice Reform Bill, because they don't want his name associated with it. But on October 31st, 2015, Teresa Halbach went missing. Teresa Marie Halbach was a 25-year-old photographer who worked for Auto Trader magazine, and her friends described her as energetic, spontaneous, and a friend to everyone. On this day at 2:30 p.m., she went to the Avery salvage yard, which was where Steven lived, where all the Averys kind of live. It's like on Avery Road or Avery Street or something. And they have a salvage yard that they run, which has tons of cars and stuff in it.
So their family's been in the area for a long time, I'm guessing.
Long time. And they don't have the best reputation. Allegedly, after going to the Avery salvage yard to take pictures of Steven's sister's minivan that he was trying to sell, she's never seen again. On November 3rd, Teresa was reported missing by her mother. Coworkers say that she hadn't been to work in 3 days. I also want to point out, coworkers didn't report her missing. Neither did her roommate, even though he would later say it wasn't like her to not come home. On November 5th, day 6 of her missing, her SUV is found on the Avery property by some members of the search party. Those members are Pamela Sturm, who is Halbach's second cousin, and Sturm's daughter, Nicole. After they met up and received instructions, the search parties that were put together by Halbach's ex-boyfriend and her brother, Halbach's ex-boyfriend, who is friends with Teresa's new roommate, who it would later come out that she possibly was sexually involved with both of them, which is no shade to her. It's just a very twisted web.
Yeah, you're going to have to go over that again. So go over the last bit again. The names.
Search party.
Yeah.
It's put on by her brother, her ex-boyfriend, and then her ex-boyfriend is friends with the roommate that Teresa's currently living with. They put together these search parties, right? And they go to different areas. And in the search party that is going to the Avery yard to search, which is so, like, it didn't even go over how they got the idea to search the Avery yard. Because, like, I mean, maybe because it was the last place she was supposedly at. Maybe that's why. But they willingly let them in to search the Avery. Like, they asked for permission and they were like, yeah, go ahead and search. Like, whatever. So Pamela Sturm is Halbach's second cousin. And her daughter, Nicole, they received instructions, and out of the group, they were, like, the only ones given a camera.
Are they're two of many on the property, or the only two at the salvage yard?
I'm not exactly sure, because I know there were lots of people searching, but in the documentary, it only points out these two. So it's hard to know. They, like I said, they received permission to search the 40-acre property from Steven's brother, and they discover Teresa's RAV4 just 40 minutes later. So they discover her vehicle kind of like covered by branches, kind of hidden amongst the vehicles, because it's a salvage yard, so they have hundreds of cars.
Yeah.
Right? How 40 minutes into it they found her car, I will never know. But this is where I'm going to have you pull up a recording of when she calls to talk to a dispatcher about finding the car.
Hi, this is Pam Sturm. I'm on the search for Teresa Halbach, and we have found a RAV4.
Is there any license plates on it?
No plates on it, but it's a little covered up. It's weird. It's covered up.
Okay. Can you get to the front of the car?
Yeah, I will. I can't find a VIN number. Is that okay if I go in the car?
No, do not go in the car. Do not touch the car.
Yeah.
Stay on the outside of the car. Go over to the front on the driver's side.
Okay, now hang on. The last four digits, 3044.
Okay, where are you?
Is that the number?
Where are you?
No, you're going to tell me if this is the car.
Okay, stop. I can't tell you anything. Where are you?
I'm at Avery Salvage.
Then later in the call, she says, you heard her ask, can I get in? And then she also gives him the plate number. I mean, the plate's missing. So the plate is found later in a different car on the property. But she gives the last four of the VIN. And then he goes, okay. And she goes, you have to tell me, is this the car? And he's like, no, ma'am, I can't tell you. Like,
Okay, good.
she's like, no, you have to tell me. She's like, obviously upset. So it just seems strange to me that of all the people that they're the ones who receive a camera, I mean, they're assigned to go to the Avery salvage yard. They're the ones who find her car 40 minutes in when it's a 40-acre property. I'd also like to point out that they had car crushers.
I was going to ask that. You own a salvage yard. You're not going to cover it with sticks. Like, again, I don't know the state of this salvage yard. But if you're actively, like, you're pulling parts from vehicles, you're dismantling vehicles, you're crushing them, like, a vehicle being hidden by, like, brush is going to be more attention grabbing because it's, like, obviously hiding something.
It stands out more.
Yeah, it does. It stands out more because you're surrounded by cars, all of which are being taken apart and are in various states of disassemble, you know, and then there's this car over here that's like covered in sticks and stuff. Like that's...
Yep. After this car is found, a sheriff's deputy calls into dispatch and basically says, do we have a body? And she says, like, I don't believe so. And then he says, but we have Steven Avery in custody. Which it's like that whole Avery yard, right?
Yeah.
His whole family lives on. So why are they going after Steven right away?
Do we have a body or anything yet?
I don't believe so.
We have Steven Avery in custody, though.
That's my question. It seems weird. About 30 minutes after discovering the car on the salvage yard is when they have that conversation about, do we have Steven Avery in custody yet? Do we have a body?
Okay. I'm assuming that within that 30 minutes, they get the call and they send responders out there. Like, they send deputies out there because deputies weren't on the search party. It was just family and friends, right?
Yep.
Okay. And you said the license plate was found on or in another vehicle?
And another vehicle.
See, that's weird too. Like, you own a salvage yard, you probably have many ways to get rid of a license plate. You're not just gonna like hide it in another car.
All right.
Sure.
So here's where we are. On day 6, I believe, so that Sunday, Steve Harrington, an analyst, informs that there was a very visual amount of blood discovered in the back of the vehicle, and a stain had been observed near the ignition. So they swabbed and submitted this for testing, and it indicated the presence of blood. Teeth and bone fragments later were found that were found to have belonged to Teresa. They were found in a burn pit on the Avery property, a burn pit that Steven had been seen at on the day of her disappearance. So somebody had said he was having a big fire the day of her disappearance, and later on, bone fragments were found that they linked to Teresa.
Okay.
So after they find the car, and they get a search warrant. So this is where it also gets a little bit weird, right? So since Manawak County had kind of like a conflict of interest because of the lawsuit and obvious framing last time, the Calumet sheriffs were supposed to come in and take over because they wanted a fair investigation, right? Well, the Calumet may have seemingly took over, but the Manitowoc sheriffs were still there on the property and stuff, which to me seems not okay. And even in the documentary, they say that they didn't follow proper protocol in a situation like that.
From my experience working in law enforcement and from what I have seen, when deputies and detectives know that they're going into something as critical as a missing person in which there's evidence of murder, or there's something very suspicious that they know that like this is a big deal, they are, from what I've seen, the agencies that I have worked for, they are so cautious to do everything right. Because
they don't want to have any kind of thing that could change justice being brought forward.
You know, taking a step back, these two sheriff's office know that they already know, regardless of involvement, if they're walking into something that's going to be a major case, those little like, oh, well, they can stay there, that's not a big deal. Like, no, you would be like, you have to, because if you screw anything up here, we have to throw it all away.
Yep. And that's how it should be.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, by 3:00 that afternoon, after they found the RAV4, they had a search warrant signed. So that was on November 5th. Well, the police searched the Avery's property for days after serving the search warrant, and they searched Avery's trailer and garage multiple times. It began on November 5th, and varied searches and investigative efforts continued through November 9th. So for days, they searched this property multiple times. Avery's trailer was just 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, a living room, a dining room, and a kitchen. It was about 700 square feet, right? They did multiple searches, didn't really find anything, right? Well, on the 8th search of Avery's trailer, 9th if you count the initial consent search, detective, I think he's a detective, or Officer Link, found a key to Halbach's RAV4. So in this, he's in there with like a Calumet people. He is from Manitowoc County, so he shouldn't even be
on the property.
Link was not in the actual lawsuit, but he did work for that county. Mm-hmm. He's there on the 8th search of the trailer. Underneath some slippers, he finds the key to her RAV4. How did they miss that the first 7 searches?
The first 7 times?
Why is he there when it's found? It doesn't make sense to me.
At any point, do any of the Averys say, like, you shouldn't be on the property, we have a lawsuit against you?
Like, they didn't want them there, obviously, but they weren't...
They didn't know to...
Yeah, and they didn't actively... Like, my thought is, if he was involved in it, 1, I don't think he would hide the car on the property. 2, I don't think that he... Like, if he did have it on the property, I think he would have utilized the car crushers. And he wouldn't have let them on willingly. Right?
Yeah.
That's my thought. So then when they serve the search warrant, it's like, well, they can't do anything about it.
Right.
Because they have a search warrant. During the search, they also found some guns and some handcuffs and some leg cuffs, which were...
And this is all weird. On the 8th time?
No, they had already found the guns and handcuffs and stuff. But the key was definitely found on the 8th time. During the search, they also found, like, a bullet in the garage. Kind of a crushed bullet, so it had already been used. But, mind you, let me name some of the things they didn't find. What do you think that... Jess, what would you think they would find if this was a place where a murder had occurred, where somebody had basically been murdered and burned and...
Forensic evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they didn't find blood. They didn't find semen. They didn't
any
find
of her property, like belongings.
Just her car key.
This is a weird question. Was it on like a keychain or was it just the car key? Okay.
It was on just like a little keychain connected to it.
No other keys on it though?
No.
It was a sole key?
Yep.
That's weird.
Yeah. And they swab this key for DNA. The only DNA they find on it is Avery's. If it's her car key, that she's had this car for years, don't you think that they would have found her DNA on it? Like, I don't know about you, but I probably should, but I don't clean my car keys often.
Oh God, I don't, and now I want to.
There's probably gross germs on them, but...
It's like the remotes in hotel rooms.
That's why you bring your bleach wipes, right?
Yep.
On day 10, Steven's arrested for having the guns because he's a convicted felon. He isn't allowed to possess the guns. On November 8th, Avery tells the media he thinks he's being framed because of his lawsuit. During this time, 7 of his relatives have come forth to give DNA samples, including 2 of his brothers. This is something to note because it wasn't in the documentary. At least I don't remember it being in there. 2 of his brothers are registered sex offenders. So, I mean, they all live on that property.
So why is Steven Avery being detained when there's multiple? If you think something bad happened to this woman while on the Avery property, why is only Steven being examined? Why
was he questioned from the beginning? Like, they didn't question anyone else.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't, unless they planted the evidence. How would they know that it was just Steven's DNA in there? Like, wouldn't you be questioning everyone who lived on that property?
For sure. You should be.
Day 12, November 15th, Calumet County Special Prosecutor Ken Kratz charges Avery with the murder of Teresa and the mutilation of her body, revealing that Avery's blood was the blood found in her car. And then they say, like, later that they found his sweat DNA. After Steven's arrest in January of 2006, so he was arrested in November, 2 months later, his nephew, I think he was 16 at the time, year-old Brendan Dassey, is interviewed by investigators after his cousin, who's also Steven's niece, comes forward and tells investigators he told her he helped move Teresa's body. Later on, it would come out in trial, she would say she made it up. Brendan was interviewed 4 different times with no parent or lawyers present. I know a lot of people who are listening probably have seen Making a Murderer. Since you don't, I'm going to kind of share a little bit of his story with you. So Brendan Dassey had a very low IQ and he was really awkward. You can see all the interviews that they're in the documentary, but they're also online. You can watch them and you can tell that he's very easily manipulated, kind of like he's
pliable,
very easy to influence. Yeah. And he told police at first that he wasn't involved in the murder of Teresa. And over the course of a few interviews, he came to confess to being involved after the police basically led him to tell them what they wanted to hear. And they were like, oh, Brennan, we're your friends. We just want to know. Like, basically made it sound like he could go home. Like, at one point, he even asks, like, if he can go home to watch WrestleMania or something like that. Or he says he has a project due at school the next day. Like, it's very obvious that he doesn't understand that the things that he's saying are going to keep him there. And it's very obvious that they're kind of leading him because they keep saying stuff like, oh, you're not telling us the truth. Or, like, little things to kind of lead him. And basically, they're like, at one point, I think they're like, who shot her? And it's like, you shouldn't be telling him that she was shot, right?
How'd they know she was shot?
That's another thing that I'm not really sure, because the bone fragments they found couldn't really tell that. Like, but they found that bullet in his garage, right? And so he would later recant his confession, tell his mother that the officers got in my head. And later it would come out that police had told him he would be arrested if he didn't tell him what had happened, which I already kind of went over.
Mm-hmm. Also, how?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I honestly don't know. But once it got out that Brendan was interviewed without a parent, shouldn't that all have been tossed?
It should have. In any other case, I feel like it would have been. But they say that the mom said that they could interview him, but the mom claims she did not. And then I'm going to play you, or I'm going to send you the press conference where they announce that they had arrested Brendan.
I know that there are some news outlets that are carrying this live, and perhaps there may be some children that are watching this. I'm going to ask that if you're under the age of 15, that you discontinue watching this press conference. We have now determined what occurred sometime between 3:45 p.m. And 10 or 11 p.m. on the 31st of October. 16-year-old Brendan Dassey, who lives next door to Steven Avery in a trailer, returned home on the bus from school about 3:45 p.m. He retrieved the mail and noticed one of the letters was for his uncle, Steven Avery. As Brendan approaches the trailer, as he actually gets several hundred feet away from the trailer, a long way from the trailer, Brendan already starts to hear the screams. As Brendan approaches the trailer, he hears louder screams for help, recognizes it to be of a female individual, and he knocks on Steven Avery's trailer door. Brendan says that he knocks at least 3 times and has to wait until the person he knows as his uncle, who is partially dressed, who is full of sweat, opens the door and greets his 16-year-old nephew. Brendan accompanies his sweaty 43-year-old uncle down the hallway to Steven Avery's bedroom, and there they find Teresa Halbach completely naked and shackled to the bed. Teresa Halbach is begging Brendan for her life. The evidence that we've uncovered establishes that Steven Avery at this point invites his 16-year-old nephew to sexually assault this woman and he's had bound to the bed. During the rape, Teresa is begging for help, begging 16-year-old Brendan to stop, that you can stop this. 16-year-old Brendan, under the instruction of Steven Avery, cuts Teresa Halbach's throat, but she still
Did you notice,
doesn't die.
like, he kind of talked about it like it was like a movie or a book or something? What were your thoughts, basically?
Yeah, I'm trying to come at this as like a taking this all at face value, right? Don't know anything other than what I've been told here. There is definitely like dramatic pauses. It very much in the sense of the word of a dramatic pause, like waiting for the reaction, in which, like, when you're going over something that's tragic, those aren't the places that you're going to want to pause. And, like, those aren't moments that need to sink in for your audience. You don't need to do the dramatic pauses for something like that. Like, that's not what that speech pattern normally looks like.
Did you notice his face, too, while he was talking?
Yeah.
It was weird, right?
Maybe you'll get into it a little bit later, too, but I'm confused over... So they ask Brendan, like, when she was shot or something like that. And then in this press conference, they said that he helped stab and strangle her to death.
Mm-hmm.
But all they found of the remains were teeth and bone bits that were supposedly left over from a fire.
Right? Lots of questions about that, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to kind of go over the timeline of Brendan. So before Brendan, they tried to get to Steven's, like, fiance. They're no longer together anymore. But at the time, they tried to get to her and get her to, like, say that he did it. But it would come out later in trial that he literally was there's a taped phone call between the two of them the day that he supposedly did all this. And I don't remember in that conference, but in another one, Ken Kratz says that as Brendan was walking over to the trailer, he was far away and he could hear her screams. So why were her screams not heard on the taped telephone calls? And also, if he's holding someone hostage, how could he remain that calm? I don't know. I mean, we all know there are psychopaths out there. So it could have happened that way. She could have not been yelling at that time. It could have already been over. Who knows? But after she wouldn't give him up, that's when they kind of turned their attention to Brendan because of the comments that his cousin made. March 1st, 2006, Brendan is interrogated by police without any legal advisor or an adult. And I think in one of the interviews, I could be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure in one of the interviews, they're like, do you remember the rights we read to you? Like, and he's like, yeah. But he obviously is, like, not the brightest. So he initially denied involvement. Then he leads on to say, oh, I saw body parts in the fire. Then he says he helped move Halbach's body into the bonfire. Then he says he raped her because Steven raped her. Then when they ask later, who shot Teresa in the head, he says, I did. Then he later takes back. I think he says Steven did. Like, there's just a lot of stuff that doesn't add up.
That stuff always makes me so nervous. Like, always have a representative with you when talking to anybody. Like,
Even if you're not a child.
yeah, yes.
Even if you're 100% not guilty, like innocent.
Yes.
Always have somebody.
Yeah.
March 2nd, he's charged with being a party to the first-degree homicide of Halbach, as well as sexual assault and mutilation of her body. And then additional charges are added to Avery's case 5 days later, and they include sexual assault, kidnapping, and false imprisonment. So, in the trial, it comes out that one of the sheriffs had run Teresa's license plate before Teresa's vehicle had supposedly been found, but after she had been reported missing.
Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, this is Lynn.
Then,
Hi, Andy.
can you run Sam William Henry 582? See if it comes back to that.
Sam William Henry 582. Yes. Okay, shows that she's a missing person, and it lists to Teresa Halbach.
Okay.
Okay, that's what you're looking for, Andy?
99 Toyota.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
You're so welcome. Bye-bye.
Thoughts?
Well, I was trying to figure out what he said after he gave the plate, because he says to see if it comes back to, and then she starts talking.
Then he says at the end, did you notice, I think he says a 99.
Toyota? So the implication is he's out with the vehicle.
I was waiting to see what you thought.
I mean, my impression as not only a dispatcher, but also just as like a layperson, just as a common Joe.
A common citizen.
Yeah. He had the license plate, vehicle description. So I would assume he's out with the vehicle. So if that were the case, he acknowledges when she gives the return that it comes back to missing person and it's Teresa. His response indicates that he was expecting that. So why wasn't that vehicle processed? What happens after that? Like, why?
And where was he?
Well, yeah. So there's the implication that you've come across the vehicle of a missing person. You don't walk away from that. That's your job has only begun.
And why was he so calm?
Well, I don't ever want to take into like pinpoint like why somebody's calm or something like that. Like, I would never expect, if I had been that dispatcher and it is just like a normal and they come around and be like, okay, well, I'm out with this vehicle, go ahead, pull me a report number, something like that. I wouldn't expect their tone of voice to be any different.
I guess that's true. I'm just saying it seems weird that he just like, not calm, I guess, but like you said, he expected it to come back to her. Why didn't he tell her where he was? Why wasn't she like, oh, do you need me to process that for you? Or you need me to...
Do you want me to
Where are you? Yeah, like something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's weird. It's just kind of a weird interaction.
Yeah. Well, and again, like that's the kind of thing, like we don't know what the relationship between dispatcher and responder is like for that agency. So that's the kind of thing that I don't necessarily want to put like a spotlight on, but it's enough that that's only the tip of the iceberg with a call like that. So if you are a law enforcement officer and you go out, you find a vehicle, say that you're just driving down the road and you're like, that's a weird car that I've never seen before, and it's been there for a couple of days. I'm gonna run the license plate. You check that license plate, it comes back to a missing person. You don't just say like, yep, okay, bye. Like, that's not, you then have a cavalcade of things to do for that report you have to pull now.
Exactly. I just found it funny that it came out later in trial. It's questionable.
Yeah, it's this agency is definitely not squeaky clean.
Nope. February 2006, Avery has to settle his lawsuit because of everything that's going on, and instead of the $36 million, he gets $400,000. And part of the reason that he settled was so he could pay for legal representation.
This guy got done so dirty.
Yeah. Part of this settlement is that they don't have to admit to any wrongdoing, and none of them lose their jobs. So those people who set him up and helped frame him don't have to go anywhere.
How far was the Innocence Project involved? Like, were they just involved enough to get him out of prison?
Yeah, they were involved in this trial or his lawsuit.
I feel like if they had one, of course they would have to have money and stuff like that. But if they had the resources, like nowadays with the resources available, like some association, company or whatever would want to help them with what they're going through because people are more aware that this
wrongful
stuff
convictions happen.
Yeah. And so they'd be jumping in and being like, no, you're not agreeing to that. Like,
yeah, and what lawyer let him agree to that?
Yeah, to anybody like stepping outside of it, not involved, who's even moderately familiar with things is like, that's a bad deal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, please
That's
don't.
like significantly lower.
They broke many, many laws, and they should not just be able to be like, oh, well,
Here's
we'll
some
settle
pennies
this,
for
but,
your...
But you have to say that we didn't do anything wrong. Nah, bullshit. You did a lot wrong.
Yeah. All of it was wrong. The whole thing was wrong.
The whole thing.
On January 29th, 2007, additional charges that were added after Brendan's confession, if you'll remember, like the sexual assault, kidnapping, all that stuff, are dropped against Avery. Comes out that Brendan's not going to testify at Steven's trial, which is really weird because Dassey's confession is really all they have. The only DNA evidence that they have is the evidence in the RAV4 and on the key. I mean, it's DNA evidence is DNA evidence is DNA evidence, right? But it's still not a lot for what they're alleging happened. They're alleging they stabbed her in that trailer or the garage or shot her. There's going to be blood. And I'm sorry, but they even took up part of the concrete flooring in the garage, right? And there was no blood. Even if, let's just say, this is my thought. Even if what they're alleging happened and they cleaned up, there's only so much you can clean up. There's always going to be something left. The defense also announces they found evidence that a vial of Steven's blood was tampered with, and they're basically accusing law enforcement of placing his DNA in the car and on the key. So they go back and look at like some of the evidence they have against Steven before, and they note that Link had blood evidence, and then they go look at the vial and they think it's been tampered with because it has a needle mark. Which to me, I think that was just like to be like a shocker moment in the documentary because that's how you get the blood in the vial. Like anyone who's had testing done knows that. But the fact is they did have this evidence and Link had a key to like the evidence and property and stuff. And he could have gone in there anytime because he was higher up. And
why do they even still have that? Once DNA goes on file, do you have to keep that?
No, because it would be on file.
It's all digital.
Yeah, you get rid of the blood after it's in there. I don't know, dude. I don't know. At Steven's trial, pre-trial hearings in January of 2007, the charges of the kidnapping and sexual assault were dropped. He stood trial in Calumet County in March of 2007. Ken Kratz was the leading prosecutor, and the Manitowoc County Circuit Court Judge Patrick Willis presided. On March 18th, he's found guilty of first-degree murder and illegal possession of a firearm, which, I mean, yeah, definitely he illegally was possessing a firearm. Sure. He's acquitted of corpse mutilation. If you're going to find him guilty of the first-degree murder, don't you think you'd have to find him guilty of the corpse mutilation? Because if you think he murdered her, he then burned her.
So Brendan refutes his confessions. They pull all of those charges. So the only evidence they have for the murder charge is his blood in the car and on the key?
And the fact that she was there that day.
Wow.
And then in trial, it also came out that he had called her 3 times that day, and he had requested her to come by name. And he was also a little bit creepy and had answered the door in a towel before when she had come. She had told people she felt kind of grossed out by it, which I think I would be too.
Yeah.
So he was definitely creepy. He's sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole on the murder conviction, plus 5 years on the weapons charge to run concurrently, so he's never getting out. On January 2016, after The Making a Murderer had been released, People magazine reported that one of the jurors was the father of a Manitowoc County Sheriff's deputy. Another juror was a clerk with the Manitowoc County. And
God, so dirty.
Yep. A juror had to be released during the trial because he had a family emergency, and he later said that 7 of the jurors had originally voted not guilty, and he couldn't believe that they found him guilty after he had to leave. Other jury members say that he's lying. We'll never know, really. Another juror allegedly told Making a Murderer filmmakers that they felt intimidated to return a guilty verdict because they were scared for their safety. So, after Steven's found guilty, Brendan goes to trial. He was first appointed a court-appointed lawyer, Lynn Kaczynski, who was eventually removed by the court in August of 2006 because he decided not to appear with Brendan during a May 13th interrogation, which there's video of that too. And he basically, a lot of things come out in this documentary. So basically, he brings Brendan to an interrogation where he knows the person's going to try and get him to confess. In the interrogation, Brendan basically draws a picture of what he says happened. And the guy's like, Brendan, I know you're not telling me the truth. The first thing he does with his statement about what happened that night is he tells him exactly what happened that night, right? He's like, oh, I did this, this, and this. Teresa's nowhere in that. So the guy goes, well, I know that's not true. What happened with Teresa? So basically leads him again to confessing, makes him draw these pictures, and basically leads him to say that he raped her because with Steven and all this other stuff, right? Because his lawyer actively is helping. It later also comes out that people involved in the case had sent emails back and forth, and somebody had said that the Avery family tree was a one-limbed tree, basically implying incest, implying that there was a lot of sexual abuse in the family, which I don't know for sure whether that's true or not, right? But there was nothing that supported that at the time.
It also has no bearings on
this case. Yes. And then that somebody makes the comment of it's a one-limb tree and we should cut it off, basically saying like, let's get rid of it, right? Another thing is, I think it's the sheriff or the DA who makes a statement about framing Avery and says something like, if we had wanted to frame him, or if we'd wanted to get rid of him, basically saying if we'd wanted to get rid of him, it would have been easier to kill him, which is like, I'm sorry, what did you just say? You really just said that on television?
I don't have words.
There's just a lot that comes out afterwards that makes you question, right? So Kaczynski is taken off the case and is replaced by 2 public defenders. Kaczynski later he doesn't admit, but basically comes out that Kaczynski had allowed him to be interrogated and actively tried to help to get Brendan to admit that he had murdered Teresa. He still denies it, but you can see the tapes online. His trial begins on April 16th, 2007, with a jury from Dane County, Wisconsin. Trial lasts 9 days, and the verdict comes in on April 25th of 2007. They only deliberated for 4 hours, and they found him guilty of the first-degree intentional homicide, rape, and mutilation of a corpse. So I think they keep the rape in there because he admitted to it, but Steven wouldn't admit to it. And my thing is, I don't think they wanted Brendan to go to trial at Avery's trial, because they didn't want that chance of him being cross-examined and them seeing that he was easily manipulated and all of that stuff coming out. But then they used it against him to put him away. So he was sentenced to life in prison with the eligibility of parole in 2048. In summer of 2007, on June 1st, Avery, who was 44, was sentenced to the life imprisonment without possibility of parole. And on August 2nd is when Brendan is sentenced to life imprisonment. So he's like 17 years old when he's basically told that he's gonna die in jail. In August of 2011, a state appeals court denies Avery's petition for a new trial. In 2013, the Wisconsin Supreme Court denied a motion to review the ruling. In January 2016, Chicago attorney Kathleen Zellner, in collaboration with the Midwest Innocent Project, filed a new appeal and cites violation of Avery's due process rights, accused officials of gathering evidence and basically planting evidence. And in December of 2015, Dassey's attorneys filed a writ of habeas corpus in the federal district court asking for release or a retrial. And they cite constitutional rights violations from ineffective assistance of counsel from his first lawyer, Kaczynski. And then in August 2016, there seems to be hope because Dassey's convictions overturned by a federal magistrate, Judge William E. Duffin. He rules that Brendan's confession was involuntary and basically coerced. He grants a defense petition to have Dassey released. But the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 7th Circuit overturns his ruling on November 17th, ordering that Dassey remain in prison, basically, pending the resolution of the state's appeal. He filed for parole in 2021 and was denied, and he's still currently trying to file for parole. In June 2017, the 7th Circuit upheld the decision to overturn the conviction, leaving the state with the options of appealing the ruling or retrying him. The state then petitioned the appellate court to hear a new case, and then the state's petition was granted, and the appellate court reversed the magistrate's ruling, saying that Dassey's confession did not violate the Constitution. Dassey's attorneys then filed a petition to have the Supreme Court hear his case, but the request is denied. He's still in prison. In August of 2016, Kathleen Zellner files a motion with Manitowoc County Circuit Court for post-conviction scientific testing. A judge signs it and orders for the scientific testing to proceed. On June 7th, 2017, she files another motion. Mind you, it has 1,272 pages, citing ineffective assistance of counsel, Brady violations, and she supplies affidavits of experts trying to say that the manner in which they're saying Teresa was killed couldn't be proved. And she also cites an ethical violation of Kratz. So you remember Ken Kratz, the one who had the press conference?
Yes.
Okay. After all of this, it comes out that he had been sexting victims of domestic violence crimes that he was supposed to be basically representing. He then goes to rehab and says that he's addicted to sex and addicted to drugs and all this other stuff. Which, my thing is, wouldn't you have to relook at everything then?
You would.
Any other place would have to look at every single case he ever touched.
Yeah.
Right? Zellner says that his conviction was due to false testimony of the people who basically set him up and framed him, and that the evidence was placed there. And she wants a new trial, and in quotes, in the interest of justice. On October 3rd, 2017, that motion for a new trial is denied. On February 26th of 2019, the Wisconsin Court of Appeals grants Avery's petition requesting that his case goes back to trial court for the evidentiary hearing. And then based on the bone fragments found in the county gravel pit. Okay, so basically in her motion, she cites that there was 3 different areas that actually the bones came from. And it's not just on the Avery's property. I guess there's a county-owned quarry, and there was a pelvic bone found there. So she's saying she's trying to say that basically they can't prove that that's where Teresa's body was burned, and they can't prove that's the only place that Teresa's body was. Oh, she also alleges that basically the county is holding her bones and she wants more testing done. And then she's saying they should at least give the bones back to Teresa's family. She went on to file another motion because of that, she wants more testing done. Basically, on July 28th, 2021, the Court of Appeals for Wisconsin affirmed the circuit court's denial of Steven's brief and basically says they don't believe any of it. In 2015, a petition was created to have the president basically pardon him, but they said that they couldn't because it's not their jurisdiction, kind of. It's still the states, basically. So here are some things that I like the other stuff. There's a whole season of Making a Murderer season 2 where it goes over all of that in detail, but I just kind of pointed it out. But basically, petition after petition after petition that's filed gets denied, except Brendan Dassey almost gets out of jail, but then right when literally the day he's supposed to get out or the day before, they deny it. They're both currently still in jail, and they're running out of options, basically. I don't know a lot about the court system because it's just too much. There's a lot. In season 2, they go over the different levels, so I highly recommend, if you're interested in that, to watch that season, because there's one episode where Brendan's attorneys literally show you in a diagram, which was very helpful, because I'm I don't understand.
Visual.
Yeah. And they go over the different steps, but basically they're screwed. So these are some things that I'm going to point out, and then Jess, I want you to tell me what you think. So the first thing that I find troubling is that he was already basically framed. Basically, right after this whole lawsuit comes out is when Teresa goes missing. That plate is ran before they even find, supposedly, the RAV4 on her property. The fact that the sheriff's office hated the Averys completely, and those emails that would come out accusing the family of incest and sexual abuse and saying, we need to cut that family out, which I'm going to point out again, his brothers are registered sex offenders. And after Avery was released for this crime that he didn't commit, a 17-year-old girl came forward and accused him of raping her, which they don't go over in the documentary. I don't know what came of that, but she did. So at the least, we know that his family are sex offenders. However, even if that stuff was put on the property, and maybe, because their IQs are supposedly low, they didn't really think they would get caught, right? I don't know. And maybe that's why they just left the car like it was and let people come on or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. But I feel like you didn't investigate everybody who lived on that property. There are so many other people who could have been involved in this that you didn't investigate because you had tunnel vision. You didn't go into everyone else's house and look for blood. I just feel like Brendan Dassey didn't have a chance.
I agree.
I feel so sad for him. I think he's another victim in this whole thing. So let's say this did happen and Steven asked him to come do this with him or made him, right? He's a victim in that aspect.
He's a victim either way.
Yeah. If that's what happened.
Right.
If it's not what happened, then yet again, he's another victim of the sheriff's office because they are against the Averys so much. Another thing, the key. The key bothers me. How was it missed? And how did that person find it? On day 8. The whole thing with Kratz and the DV victims. The way he kind of talked about it kind of weirds me out a little. It also bothers me, though, that Avery called Teresa 3 times before she disappeared and that he had asked for her by name. That's a little weird. Bothers me that his quote-unquote sweat DNA was found under the latch of her car. I don't know. That's just what they imply. Bothers me that Teresa had told her friends he'd answered a door in a towel. Like, maybe he did have a sexual attraction to her. Maybe he was super weird and super fucking creepy. Doesn't mean he murdered her, right?
Right.
Another thing that bothered me later, like in the trial, I don't think they looked at her ex-boyfriend or her roommate or even her brother the way they should have, because it came out later that, like, I think it was her brother or it was the ex-boyfriend, one or the other or both of them, basically hacked into her phone records after she was missing. They knew her password. They printed out her phone records. They went through her voicemails and said that they hadn't deleted anything. However, when someone had called, her inbox had been full, and then all of a sudden it had room for more messages. So that's weird to me. It's weird that her roommate didn't report her missing. It's weird that they didn't follow the right chain of command for situations like this. It's just weird. Also, as of May 2006, Avery was the only one of the Innocence Project's 174 exonerees to have been charged with a violent crime after release. Those are all weird things.
Yeah.
That's just my thought. I go back and forth, right? When I watched the first time, I was like, oh my God, this guy was totally framed. When I watched it the second time, I was like, I don't know, like, maybe all that time in prison changed him. Maybe he thought because he was doing all this good or whatever and was like basically a public figure, he could get away with everything that he wanted to. But I don't think he's that smart. I don't.
I think regardless of what happened, taking a look at what we know, right? What we know, not what we have to guess, what we know. In my opinion, there's more than enough grounds for a mistrial.
There's more than enough reasonable doubt.
And the fact that as law enforcement, you're responsible for building up the evidence. It needs to be by the book, flawless, because you were putting somebody away for a very serious crime. You can't afford to have the little mistakes that lead to those questions. Everything you said, right? What we know is that her vehicle was found on the property, hidden, but we also know that days before that vehicle was ran by a law enforcement officer. So we need to find out why that happened, what the circumstances are around that. We need to figure out, okay, well, if there was blood in the vehicle and blood on the key, so then where from Steven's body did that blood come from? Was he ever, like, did they ever look for actual injuries on him? Anything like that?
He did have a cut on his hand.
Okay. So a cut on your hand, is that going to leave like that much forensic evidence to be found, like, throughout a car and on a key? Like, depends on the severity of the cut. Again, this is just from my point of view, from my opinion, these are things that need to be looked at for this to even be able to convict this guy. So you have the bones and teeth that were found on the property, but bones were also found elsewhere. So is that the implication that, like, all of her other personal belongings were burnt? Like, what else was found with those bones? Like, if they weren't found, where is her property? Where's the forensic evidence of the crime? Yeah, exactly. Where's the forensic evidence of the crime of how she died, whether it be stabbing, shooting, whatever they think happened, because
strangling.
Nothing is clear about anything. And then you can't take into account Brendan's, because every interview Brendan had was handled incorrectly.
Yep.
So, like, stepping back and looking at it regardless of guilt or innocence, what they did and what they have is not enough to put away a man for life. Also, the fact that that law enforcement agency already has grief with not only the Avery family as a whole, but with Steven in particular.
Mm-hmm.
That means anything that law enforcement agency touched should have been thrown out.
Yep, that key, that RAV4 that officer ran before they found it. And here's my thing, right? So let's look at it like you said, even if what they're saying has happened, there's too much reasonable doubt. There's too many questions, right? Mm-hmm. He deserves a retrial at the least.
Yeah, absolutely.
My thing is, like, maybe they did frame him. I don't know. They framed him last time. They went out of their way to frame him. Or maybe they were like, we know it's him. We're going to do everything we can to prove it, which in a way is framing him. But let's say they're wrong. Let's say he didn't do this. Let's say one of his brothers did. Or later on in season 2, it comes out that Brendan Dassey's brother was looking up some really questionable porn shit. They didn't look into everyone on that property, and they should have.
Right.
If, in fact, Steven was framed, or if, in fact, they had tunnel vision and they just focused their investigation on him, he has become a victim again. So has Brendan. Guess what? So has Teresa. Even though we already know she's a victim, now her justice isn't coming forward. And there's a killer out there somewhere.
They owe it to Teresa and Teresa's family to handle things properly. So in the event that Steven comes back and says, I was framed for this, I'm innocent, they can say no, and this is why. Instead of having all these questionable things that they've done, it needs to be clean.
Yep.
It needs to be like, no, you don't have to consider that because as soon as we found out that the Avery's involved, our agency stepped out.
Yep. And this whole thing is dirty.
Yes. The whole thing is. If he did commit this crime, they went about their investigation the wrong way.
Yep.
If he is actually guilty, you should have done it in which there was no doubt.
Amen.
Thank you for listening. Additional information for each case can be found on our website, truthliesandalibis.buzzsprout.com. New episodes will be uploaded every Monday. Find us on Facebook and Instagram at Truth Lies and Alibis.